I never thought I'd start one of my YouTube videos referring to TikTok, but it seems the time has come. In short, I have a TikTok account where I create retro gaming content, and when I have time, I try to engage with other content creators. And even though this is a trend on TikTok, which every creator adapts to their own style, I came across something interesting. So here is the scene. It's evening, you just gotten home from work, finished your chores, fulfilled your family obligations, and now you sit down in front of your current console, scrolling through the store or the game catalog, trying to decide what your next game will be. You do this until finally two things happen. First, you don't end up playing anything at all, or second, you pick something that keeps you engaged for about 15 or 30 minutes at most, and you rather never touch it again. While this is the essence of this video trend on TikTok, it resonated so deeply with me and I could relate to it so well that I had to ask myself, why is this happening? Do modern games suck now? At 37 years old, after such a scenario, it happens much more often than not that I end up not playing anything, instead opting to read something, watch a movie, watch a TV series or a YouTube video. However, even when I do choose a game, it rarely keeps me engaged for a long time. My enthusiasm for gaming died somewhere around the PlayStation 3 era, when I was in my mid-20s and my focus shifted more towards studying, girls, friends and work. Of course, we occasionally played, but mostly multiplayer. In the last 7 years, since I'm only working, big quotation marks here, and I admit, because after 30, I prefer spending my evenings at home rather than in any pub, I try to get back into gaming. I'm not saying all modern games are bad, but the list of ones I've played and enjoyed isn't exactly vast. Resident Evil 2, 3, 4 remakes, Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, Spyro Reignited, Uncharted 4, and maybe there are a couple more that I don't remember at the moment. These ones I played with childlike enthusiasm almost every day, but beyond these, I've started many games, yet I mostly felt them as kind of obligation, like a second job I had to progress in just because I started them, rather than a game that relaxes me and one I enjoy. Maybe I just become a grumpy middle-aged person who is picky, or maybe the selection has grown too large, and with online stores and game catalogs, everything is so available that I don't know how to handle it. Partially, that's certainly the case, but on the other hand, I have realized that modern games really do suck. Let's face it, in the 70s, 80s, 90s and 2000s, video games were not mainstream at all, and I don't think they were as big of a business as they are now. Back then 5 or 10 people made a game in the corner of an office with almost artistic freedom granted by the company and publisher that financed it. I'm not saying the video game industry didn't generate money back then, but the development of a game wasn't about 500 people working on it, with hitting certain quotas based on market research, determining what a good single-player game should be. Essentially, games were not designed as a product with calculated metrics, but rather as art. At least this is how I felt as a kid. Maybe this is not true to the full extent, but even as an adult, when I play any older games, they just scream art to some extent. This is also why we get ridiculous things in our games now, like 200 hours plus of gameplay, 4 or 5 or even more DLCs, season passes, customizations, or any game element that might not even have a meaningful place in the game. It's just a trend. Sure, you could say you want 200 hours of content in exchange for $60 or $90, but honestly, how often does that actually mean quality content? Maybe only when talking about Rockstar games or The Witcher 3. We shouldn't forget that because of this, most games in a way feel the same. They don't necessarily look the same, but there are a lot of similarities. Menus, prompts, icons, those half-cut scenes where you need to hold a button and that's the gaming experience apparently. And sometimes even the visuals are similar as well. But I wouldn't blame Unity or Unreal for this, because they are very useful and because there are plenty of indie games with unique visuals developed in Unreal and Unity, and I'll get back to the indie scene later. One other aspect is that older games didn't treat players like idiots by holding their hands every step of the way. Moreover, they were generally aimed at an older audience than today's target demographic. Nowadays, games are practically autoplay experiences where you just click and the game tells you what to do, where to go and how to do it. If it's too hard, there is already a prompt popping up on the screen if you haven't figured it out within 2 seconds, or worse. If that's not the case, the game soon gets patched to include such prompts. It's not a mainly single player focused thing, but we can also say goodbye to classic on-couch multiplayer, which has been dead for quite a few years. But slowly online multiplayer is starting to die too, at least enjoyable online multiplayer, because the streaming giants have grown in the last 10 years. And there are games, especially multiplayer ones, being made specifically for streaming because so many publishers and developers see money in this. Can enjoyable games be made for streaming? Sure, but how does the following mindset and the following question to develop a game benefits gaming and art and gamers? The question being, what game can we make that 100 of the most famous streamers would love and millions of people would watch? To me it sounds absurd that the question isn't simply, what changes should we implement in the next first-person shooter, for example? You know, just a question on how to develop a great game for the gamers who can enjoy it. With the 7th generation came DLCs and patches. Early on we used the patches to fix bugs and download later DLCs for the game to extend the gaming experience. Nowadays it's almost natural that on the release day a game is unplayable unless you are online to download the day 1 patch. Some people still complain about this, but unfortunately it's become much more normal. Don't get me wrong, DLCs and patches as an option are huge, even though most games back in the day were released as finished games. But I'm sure you remember games with small bugs that a patch could have fixed, making the gaming experience just perfect. Of course, these bugs were never game-breaking, so they become kind of a charm of the game. But the point is that these downloadable elements are very useful indeed. We just gone overboard with them, and now games are finished with patches and DLCs. Finally, we return to the greed for profit. We used to pay for games, and there is nothing wrong with that. But what's developed in the last 10-15 years and how the greed of the game publishers has escalated is astonishing. Microtransactions, season passes, battle passes, pre-orders, paid DLCs, in-game gambling mechanics, and I'm not even that up to date with these, so you can probably add to this list, and I'll probably cry. Let's not even get into the situation with consoles, especially considering what Sony has done with the PS5. There already have been 3 versions of the console, yet 5 years later there aren't even 20 PlayStation 5 exclusive games. But sure, buy the PS5 Pro at double the price of the slim console, even though the only difference is that it can render in 8K, but you have to buy the disc drive separately. Tragic comedy. So maybe I'm at fault for not being enthusiastic about modern games, and this video is not meant to criticize those who enjoy modern games. Feel free to enjoy them. Don't let anyone take that from you. But when I consider that I'm essentially getting a product designed and based on market research that's the same as hundreds of others, overpriced, filled with unnecessary boring content, lost all its artistic value, even if the initial idea had something, and on top of that, every click in-game wants more and more money from me for an unfinished product, I'm not surprised that my enthusiasm has died in the recent years. But to end the video on a high note, at least the old games are always here for us. There are also great remasters out there, and the indie gaming scene is getting stronger. There is hope. I was Gabe, and I catch you in the next one. Until then, keep gaming.